Mhm.
That would be fine.
Okay, so good morning, everyone, and good evening for Professor Soms. So, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Vito. I'm an undergraduate student. I'm from the Faculty of Philosophy at Universitas Gadjah Mada. So it's a great honor to moderate today's discussion, uh, especially with someone whose work has deeply shaped how we think about language, meaning, and truth. Since in Indonesia, I think we are not that familiar with these topics. That's why I think I'm so excited for this discussion, especially as someone who owns academic focus lies in the philosophy of language and philosophy of technology. I have long admired Professor Swam's for example, for his work for rigorous defense of realism in semantic and his attempts to bridge metaphysical and linguistic inquiries. His writing, for me, especially rethinking language, mind, and meaning, and also the analytic tradition in philosophy were among the first that made me realize uh, how the analytic tradition continues to evolve beyond its classical form. So let me know, let me let me introduce our panelists today. So we are joined by Professor Scott Storms, distinguished professor of philosophy at the University of Southern California. Professor Storms is one of the central figures in contemporary analytics philosophy. His works, I think, redefined our understanding of proposition, truth, and modality, extending from such figure like Frege and Russell to Kripke and beyond. Uh, I think his conceptual clarity and defense of structure proposition have been crucial in addressing what we now call hyper-intentional phenomena in language. Alongside Professor Soms, we have also have Ahnaf. Uh, so Ahnaf or MK Kotrunada Ahnaf is a thinker specializing in logic, metaphysics and logic, and philosophy of science. He holds an master in philosophy in the same faculty with me, philosophy from Universitas Gadjah Mada, and also is the founder of Intuitionistic ID, a community dedicated uh, to advancing analytic and logical inquiry in Indonesia. So his work basically bridge formal reasoning, cognitive analysis, and study of meaning and something like that. So yeah, uh, on a, on a personal note, I must say that Professor Swam's work has deeply influenced my own philosophical trajectory as someone who studies and into the intersection between philosophy of language and philosophy of technology. I often think about how meaning operate in our increasingly digital world, how machine process, interpret, and sometimes even simulates understanding. Reading Psalms, I think, taught me that no matter how advanced our technology becomes, the essence of meaning still lies in a cognition, in act of representing the world as being in a certain way. So yeah, I think with that, it's a great pleasure to welcome our speaker. And please join me in giving a warm round for applause, especially for our distinguished speaker, to Professor Scott Soames. So, for Professor Soames, I think the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Let me say something first before I begin my short talk to you. When I was listening to your remarks, Your voice faded in and out, not because you weren't speaking properly, but because of something about my connection, which I hope does not repeat itself so that my voice goes in and out when I'm speaking to you. Anyone at any time, if they need me to repeat or slow down or say something more clearly, you can go ahead and indicate that to me, and I will. Okay, with that, I will begin. Do you understand?
Yes, sure.
Sure, thank you, Professor.
Okay, I will then begin. I'm going to talk about propositions today. These are discussed in chapters 12 and 13 of volume 3 of my book series. The title of the book series is The Analytic Tradition in Philosophy. And the title of volume 3 is The Struggle for Modality. By that I mean understanding necessity and possibility. Propositions, what are they? They are things that are expressed by uses of sentences. They are things that we assert, we believe, we know, and they are the bearers of truth and falsity. They are the fundamental bearers of truth and falsity. We call sentences true or false when the propositions they express are true or false. The story of propositions in the analytic tradition begins with Frege, whose goal, as I'm sure you know, was to reduce arithmetic to logic. To do that, he supplemented his version of the predicate calculus with a theory of sense and reference, which can, in principle, be applied to both formal and natural languages. For Frege, propositions were the senses of declarative sentences. He called them thoughts. He took them to be a certain kind of abstract object. Frege was followed in the analytic tradition by G.E. Moore and Bertrand Russell, who struggled to distinguish true propositions from facts. He took propositions to be structured combinations of objects, properties, and relations. Unfortunately, Frege and Russell failed to explain how such structures, whether they be merely sequences, whether they're hierarchical structures, no matter what kind of structures they are, how could they represent possible facts, the existence of which would make those things, the alleged propositions, true? They failed because the structures they called propositions, which were supposed to interpret sentences, themselves required interpretation, without which they couldn't interpret anything. Hence, we didn't get a true explanation. When Russell realized this in around 1910, he abandoned propositions and he took minds like yours and mine to be the source of representation. But he still needed individual things that were true and individual things that were false. And he wasn't successful in identifying these. Now I believe we can do better by observing that minds represent things as being various ways when they perceive or imagine or think of them as being those ways. In short, we can identify propositions with repeatable cognitive act types, certain kinds of mental acts. What do I mean? When one perceives or thinks of a certain item, call it X, as hot, one predicates being hot of X. That act represents X as hot in something like, in a sense that's analogous to the one in which an act can be said to be irresponsible when to perform it is to neglect one's responsibility. A similar sense of representing applies to cognitions, cognitive acts. When to think of X as being F is to represent O as it really is, we identify an entity it has when it's accurate. The entity is a proposition, which is the cognitive act type of predicating X of that F of that object. The property is truth, which the proposition has. When to perform it is to represent X as it in fact is. So see, part of the key idea there is, what are these representational entities? They are certain acts of mind, certain acts of thinking, certain acts of identifying an object and a property and thinking of the object as having that property, predicating that property of it. So when one perceives or thinks of X as hot, one predicates being hot of X. This act represents X as hot, in a sense analogous to one in which an act can be said to be irresponsible when to perform it is to neglect one's responsibilities. That's an analogy. What I'm trying to get at is this. When to think of X as being F is to represent O as it really is. We identify an entity plus the property it has when it's accurate. The entity is the proposition, which is the cognitive act type of predicating that property of that thing. The property is truth, which the proposition has. When to perform it is to represent X as it in fact is. Now, what about more complex attitudes? They're similar. To judge that X is hot is to affirm the predication in a way that strengthens one's disposition to act toward X in ways conditioned by one's previous experience with hot things. To believe X is hot is to be disposed to judge it to be hot. To know that X is hot is for X to be hot and to justifiably believe that it is. Since believing P doesn't require cognizing that proposition, anyone that can perceive or think of the objects and properties in terms of which P is defined can believe P. even if the agent can't predicate properties of propositions themselves or think about propositions. So perhaps dogs and cats and other animals of that type can believe many things, but they can't predicate properties of the things that they believe, namely the propositions, if they don't have enough self-conscious awareness to be able to do that in the way that humans do. That's the idea. Knowing things about propositions involves distinguishing one's cognitive acts from one another. Self-conscious agents like us who can do this can ascribe beliefs to themselves and to others and predicate properties of propositions. Focusing on their own cognitions, they identify distinct propositions as different thoughts, which leads them to treat truth as a form of accuracy. P is true at a given world state W, if and only if were W actual, things would be as P represents them. What P represents doesn't vary from world state to world state, nor does its truth require anyone to entertain it. This explains how even an organism unable to think about propositions can believe them, and then how advanced agents can acquire the concept propositions by monitoring their own cognitions. It also gives an account of what it is for a proposition to be the semantic content of a sentence. One who's competent with the sentence, Elon is human, uses the name to refer to the man, the noun to refer to humanity, and the phrase is human to predicate that property of that man, thereby performing the cognitive proposition that is the semantic content of the sentence. Now, I just talked about the proposition Elon is human. Now consider a different sentence. He is human, in which you use the pronoun he to demonstrate and hence refer to Elon. Its semantic content at this context is the same as the semantic content of the sentence containing the name. It is the cognitive act type P, this common semantic content, of predicating humanity of Elon, no matter how one identifies Elon, using the name, using him, in some other way. But that isn't the only proposition one entertains in either case. The act of using the sentence with the name is itself a representational act, which is a cognitively distinct proposition, P star, while using the pronoun in predicating the property is a cognitively distinct proposition, P star. Finally, P triple star is a cognitively distinct but representationally identical proposition in which Elon predicates the property of himself in the first person way. For example, by saying, I am human. Thus, we have four cognitively distinct but representationally identical propositions. This is what we need to track the assertions and the beliefs of agents. Now consider a famous example. Think of the names Hesperus and Phosphorus. Those who use them are expected to know that uses of one of them presuppose that its referent is visible in the evening, while uses of the other presuppose that it's visible in the morning. To mix this up is to misunderstand those two names. Suppose some agent A utters the sentence, Hesperus is phosphorus, addressing someone else, B, when both are presupposed to understand the names. Okay, A's utterance asserts two representationally identical propositions, one of which places no restrictions on how Venus is identified, and one of which requires the use of the two names. The former, which is the semantic content of the sentence, is necessary and knowable a priori. It's just this thing is this thing. The latter is necessary, but knowable only a posteriori. So here we have a classic example of the Kripkean necessary a posteriori. But to get that example, we've got to know what propositions are, and we've got to identify them with cognitive act types that can be understood in the way that I've sketched. All right. So although both of these, Hesperus is phosphorus and Hesperus is Hesperus, represent only that Venus is Venus, the person being addressed, B, can draw further conclusions. Since A and B presuppose that both understands the names, B knows that A realizes he's committed to the proposition that the object visible in the evening is the one visible in the morning. So B concludes and is able to concludes that A asserts this descriptively enriched proposition along with the uninformative bare proposition. And in fact, he could say that truly. Now, suppose A were to utter not just Hesperus is phosphorus, but how about this? Necessarily, Hesperus is phosphorus. The proposition said to be necessary won't be descriptively enriched. Why? Even though the earlier one was enriched, why won't this one be? Well, because taking the names to designate reference actually seen at certain times, which is what is presupposed, provides no information about when they are seen at other possible world states. This is why uses of the names often contribute descriptive, assertive content to clause embedded under assert and believe and other attitude verbs without making similar contributions under modal operators. And that's what you need in order to be able to understand both a kind of Kripkean understanding of names and putting it together with his insistence that necessarily Hesperus and phosphorus is an example of the necessary a posteriori instead of the necessary a priori. If you don't have an account like this of propositions, you'll have a difficult time explaining how that Kripkean solution could be possible. Okay, next, what are we going to do next? We're going to say, okay, what we just did for names, we can do for natural kind terms. So take water and heat, those two words, which designate the two kinds. One of those kinds involves hydrogen and oxygen, and the other one involves molecular motion. In each case, a kind K is the semantic content the reference, so to speak, the extension, not the extension, but the referent, that a common noun, call it CN, contributes to propositions semantically expressed by sentences containing it. Given this, plus the idea that the semantic content of CN is its meaning, one is tempted to think that kind K is the meaning of a common noun CN, and that knowing this is knowing what it means and so understanding it. I want to convince you that that is false. Understanding a term requires more than the ability to use it with its semantic content. To understand a term, one must be able to use it in ways presupposed by the linguistic community. That's true for names. The same is true for many natural kind terms. Understanding the term water requires knowing that those who use it presuppose that it stands for a colorless, drinkable liquid that falls from the sky that is necessary for life. A similar point applies to words like heat, light, and red. For K, a kind, to be the semantic content of an expression E, most minimally competent users must use that expression E with that content. Widely shared presuppositions, which often carry extensive non-semantic content, distribute that content to the contents of the speech acts expression. Consider the terms water and H2O. The proposition that water is water predicates identity of the kind water and itself, and so is knowable a priori. The a priori proposition, the a posteriori proposition that water is the substance molecules of which are made up of one hydrogen atom and two oxygen atoms is a distinct proposition because it involves the content of a definite description, which is different from a name. Now, what about this one? The proposition semantically expressed by the sentence, water is H2O. I didn't use a description. If I were to write it down, it would be capital H with a subscript 2 and then O. Okay. Now, to evaluate this depends on whether that expression H2O is a name or a definite description. And that will make a difference to what we say. Suppose it's a name, the understanding of which requires associating it with certain conventional information, just as understanding Hesperus, the name, can require associating it with certain conventional information. Suppose for common users, most of whom I'm afraid don't know chemistry, must, if they understand the name, know that it stands for a chemical compound involving hydrogen and oxygen. Suppose they need to that's not a full understanding in the scientific sense. It is partially that way. I think nothing more detailed than that is needed in order to be able to competently use H2O. Many English speakers in America do that, and they can't tell you what a molecule is or what an atom is or anything of that kind. So then, if that's correct, then the sentence semantically expresses the same trivially true proposition that water is water does. but the linguistically enhanced proposition that arises from it by requiring the first argument of identity to be cognitively identified via the term water, and the second via the term H2O, is knowable only a posteriori, because it has a cognitive content that requires that. Those who believe it, understanding both terms, realize that assertive utterances of water is H2O will typically assert that the stuff that comes in the form of a colorless drinkable liquid that falls from the sky is a chemical compound involving hydrogen and oxygen. Since speaker-hearers standardly presuppose that they understand the expressions, this proposition will normally be communicated and asserted, though similarly rich descriptive enrichment generally won't occur under modal operators. Okay. So the descriptive stuff that we associate with the term will not be placed inside the scope of a modal operator, because we know that there's no reason to think that. Understanding the terms water and H2O requires associating different information about their reference, even though their semantic contents are identical. In general, something like that has to be the explanation of Kripkean examples of the necessary a posteriori that take the form of identity claims. If you do that, I think you're going to have a hard time explaining those supposedly prototypical examples of the necessary a posteriori. Now, I just want to extend this a little bit. A similar contrast can be drawn when understanding one term requires what we might call recognitional ability, not required by a second term with the same representational content. So let me try to give a little example. Let the symbol R, the letter R, be a million-kind term designating the same surface spectral reflectance property that the term red does. Okay, so what are we thinking? We're thinking, how do we distinguish red things from other things? Well, what happens is things that are the surfaces of which are red reflect light along certain wavelengths and frequencies in ways different from blue things or yellow things. And our visual system is sensitive to that. Still, the term red doesn't require, you can understand it. Let's suppose this, to fully understand the term red, we presuppose that people can identify red things visually. That's what we normally think. Now, there are people who are blind or colorblind and they can't do this routinely or perhaps at all, but they have a diminished understanding of the term red. It's not misunderstanding, it's just that there's a certain aspect of it that they can't distinguish. Okay, let's suppose that that's so. So suppose that fully understanding the term red, which requires knowing what uses of it typically presuppose, requires being able to visually identify red things. Whereas this ability isn't required to understand the new term R that we have introduced for it. Suppose we had just basically used R and introduced it with as an abbreviation kind of for the claims about wavelengths and frequency and so on, but still treat it as a name. Then the sentence, the property being red is the property being R, can be used in a context in which it is presupposed that the term red is fully understood to assert a proposition, call it P plus, which when combined with propositions represented by one's visual experience, allows one to draw informative conclusions, not trivial ones, that couldn't have been drawn from the proposition P minus, that is semantically expressed by the sentence, which is an uninformative proposition that the property being red is the property being red. I think you need that in order to bring these under the heading that was suggested in naming and necessity. Finally, consider the sentence, Juan has just learned that water is H2O. The English sentence, to report a fact about a monolingual speaker of Spanish. Although we may assume that the proposition semantically expressed is false, it's just the proposition that water is water or H2O is H2O. And he knew those. The ascription can easily be used to express a truth. This occurs when we add the requirement that one who entertains the object of learn, that is, Juan has just learned that water is H2O, identifies one argument of identity using the term water or some translation of it, while identifying the other using H2O as some translation of it, where T2 is a translation of T1, only if conditions for understanding the two are roughly the same. Under those conditions, a use of the sentence, Juan has just learned that water is H2O, remember Juan is a monolingual speaker of Spanish, asserts that he has only recently come to believe a certain informative proposition that makes no claims about words or translations. When he is presupposed to understand the relevant terms in his language and to take the descriptive information required by such understanding to be true of their reference, the assertive utterance will assert a proposition that characterizes one as only recently coming to know that a certain stuff that comes in the form of a colorless drinkable liquid and falls from the sky in rain is a chemical compound involving hydrogen and oxygen. Examples like these show that getting the metaphysics of propositions are, what exactly are these things? Getting that right can help us account for the semantics and pragmatics of hyper-intentional examples like this. If you want to read more about the points I've summarized here, they come from chapters 12 and 13 of volume 3 of the Analytic Tradition in Philosophy, the title of which is The Struggle for Modality, and it was published by Princeton University Press this year, 2025. The other thing, I think one of you has already mentioned, this is also discussed a bit in Rethinking Language, Mind, and Meaning, which was Princeton University Press, 2015. Those are the end of my remarks today.
Thank you so much, Professor Soms, for such a clear and illuminating presentation and amazing explanation. So yeah, I think we can go to the next session. So we will now move to our commentary session. So I would like to invite our friends Ahnab to share his reflection and perhaps open some questions maybe that connect the discussion to broader philosophical or even interdisciplinary concern or yeah, let's see like and for Ahnab, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Vito Aryo, for the time, and thank you for everybody that just come here. And yeah, basically, good morning and good afternoon or good evening for
Good evening.
Professor Professor Songs. And first of all, thank you for the very clear and insightful presentations, I think. And regarding the questions of what a proposition is of course has been a central problem in philosophy, especially philosophy of language. And you have given us, I think, a compelling way to look at it, especially when I done my research on you and in your ideas about your cognitive acts types and your critique of a two-dimensional way of thinking about the propositions, and you also having research about the philosophy of law to it that I guess I've researched about you. And as I understand it, you diagnose the historical problems here. So you've come from the Frege, and then you look at the Moore and Russell, and particularly you see it as the what about to explain it? A failure to explain how propositions can represent the world without needing interpretation themselves. And
Yeah.
from your presentations too, I think your solution is to move away from the abstract object, like maybe possible world or maybe truth supporting consequences, and you want to instead identify proposition with repeatable cognitive archetypes. And as your examples too, you said that the propositions that X is hard is the, I don't know how I when I read your book, is it your what you mean by cognitive, is this the same as a mental act or not? I don't know, but I will question you that later. But I think this cognitive acts or maybe mental acts is like predicating hardness of acts, and is, yeah, I think personally is a very kind of similar to how Aristotle's in the Organon, especially in the interpretation, and when he tried to explain a propositions with how we predicating some predicates towards some objects, but this, and you are trying to move it away instead of a predicable, like how Aristotle says it is something is predicable of something else. And when I say it, you are trying to move it away to the act, not to the mind, and that's compelling for me. And beside that, that I understand is for you to be true, the truth for you is that the X is accurately represents the reality. And of course, I think what's powerful in your ideas is that your view helps to, I think, solve a long-standing problems one step further, or maybe not for some philosophers, I guess. But I think you're trying to uncover something there, and you've shown how we can distinguish between bare semantic content of a sentence and like you say, it's Venice is Venice when someone says Hesperus is phosphorus, and the richer you're to distinguish it with the richer and more informative propositions. And these distinctions, I guess, is based on the cognitive acts that you said before, and this is the important points that you said about the shared presuppositions that are tied to terms we use, and that is, I guess, before when I see another philosopher that kind of not taken account about the shared proposition because maybe they're just thinking about the world and something that we can imagine about the possible world. But you are trying to ground it here that there's some presuppositional knowledge that we need to know first before we can understand how people say something or asserting something. And I think that is your way is at glance is elegance and questions uh, my my master's my master's thesis is about the truth maker semantics and trying to analyze the metaphysical assumption behind the truth maker semantics, even if the
Mhm.
kid find itself doesn't like it. But I know, but my master's, but I'm trying to see the assumptions, not only the ontological, but the the metaphysical, and I guess the metaphysics is very is what Kit Finds says himself as naive metaphysics. But reading your work, um, I think this is a you are revealing me a very different kind of point of view, that you're not thinking the propositions towards this world, not towards that world. I mean the possible world or this world, the situations or specific situation inside the world. You're not thinking about it, but you are trying to identify the proposition within the cognitive acts, but not maybe not like Husserl saying about the mind or the structure of consciousness. No, but the act itself. That was I understand about your readings, and correct me if I'm wrong. Um, I think you're wonderfully uh, explains to us about the puzzle about the belief reports and about the natural kind terms. And of course, there's very compelling for me that uh, it grounds something meaning into our cognitive life and about the our cognitive acts. And that was a brief summary for my ideas, for my comment. But I would like to ask you some questions. Um, what I'm thinking about when you said Russell about Russell it says failed, and you said that we can um, identify propositions by repeatable cognitive act types.
Mhm.
And what I want to know is that what is the precise nature of the repeatable cognitive act types? Specifically, is the repeatability that you said is it defined by a functional or neurological or maybe phenomenological or else? And what are the specific identity conditions that make two distinct cognitive events? For example, like I'm saying that it is raining now, and when you are saying that it is raining now, and what makes these two tokens of cognitive events is, of course, two tokens is distinct because I'm saying it and you are saying it, but what makes the two tokens is being having under the same cognitive act types? That was maybe my first question to you, Professor Soames.
Well, in the case of it's raining now or something like that, um, it's now is of course a temporal and lexical. And what can be going on in your mind and my mind, or my mind at two different times, is qualitatively the same, but because one of them is an indexical, we understand that as picking out different times, and hence we can get different truth values.
Mm. So
The
the
word
truth
now will
values.
be indexical for both of us. But when we use it at different times, what gets into the proposition in terms of the representational content is the particular time that you've used it.
Yes, that's about the token
Even though
value.
the cognitive content won't show any different.
Mhm, mhm. So the
I think
cognitive
you have to
content.
separate it that way.
Okay, so the
You've got to have
cognitive.
these two kinds of content. that can be merged together into a proposition.
Okay, so there, yeah, that like your analysis, there is two different content, the semantic content and
Two different representational contents, even if the cognitive contents are the same.
two different representational content. So,
Yeah, if you say it at a different time than I do.
but how about it's the same time?
Oh, same time, then we'd get the same contents and the same representation.
So the
Same
content is
cognitive
nearly the
and the
same.
same representational content. It would be uninformative. Now is now. You
Yeah,
didn't
okay,
learn anything.
okay. So, I don't know, I guess my wild thinking is that in physics, for example, that nowness is very different from one person to another, right? Like, yeah, basically a relativity, and how we uh, trying to explain the now that you say is different. How to differentiate this linguistically, I guess.
Well,
Is
here's
it
the
you
difference.
agree with the
What's the difference between now? Let's talk about semantics. What's the difference between now and I?
is the reference, I guess.
Whoever says I refers to him or herself. Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
If I say I twice in a few seconds, I'm still referring to the same thing. If I say now, what is the scope of now? What period of time does now pick out? Does it pick out only this very moment, this very
Oh,
instant? Does it pick out a larger stretch of time? If suppose you were to ask me, what are you doing this semester? And I say, well, I'm now teaching 2 classes. I'm not picking out this instant, am I?
mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm and
You're
since they're on
picking
different
this
days.
semester, right?
Yeah, see? So you have freedom with now that it's presupposed you're talking about one time or another. With the case of I, we don't have that kind of phenomenon. With the case of here, we have the same thing. Here can be this little space. It be Los Angeles, California. It can be the northern hemisphere. It can be Earth.
Okay,
Uh,
okay.
all of these. And that depends on presupposition. What are you presupposing?
No, or maybe a context, right? I mean, like
Yeah, well, that's part of the context. What
yeah,
gets
okay,
presupposed?
okay. And is every proposition can be identified with repeatable cognitive types? I mean, basically what I'm saying
Yeah,
is that
good question.
are you
Good
a
question.
maximalist in this?
You look, I think there are limits to human cognition, just as there are limits to the cognition of other animals. And that doesn't mean that animals never believe propositions, but it means that there's something different about the propositions they believe from at least some of the propositions we believe. Because their cognitive domains, what they're capable of thinking about, are different from ours. And we could have beings which were far more intelligent than we are, could think faster, finer, more fine-grained propositions than we can. So about propositions, and I haven't said anything about all of this, but I think that's would have to go along with my view if you were to try to expand it to include the beliefs, the assertions, the knowledge of all sorts of different cognitive agents, different types.
Okay. Okay, you're here trying to accommodate that basically animals
Mm-hmm.
could also maybe um judge something, or
Sure.
even if they cannot predicate, right? And believing something, right?
Yeah, there's going to be differences. There's going to
But
be, but there
uh
will be similarities as well, depending on the species and so on.
and how complex that belief is, in your opinion? I mean, the difference between, for example, maybe my cat sees me opening a cat
Yeah,
food,
I know, I know.
right? And
I have a little
does
dog.
he have a belief that I don't know, does he have a belief that I will give the food to him, or
Yes, I think they have, I think probably your cat and my dog, it's really my wife's dog. Um, I think they do believe that sometimes they believe I'm going to give him some food. And you probably interact with your pet too, but
yes,
well, wants brings things to me and wants me to throw them, and then he'll run and bring it back, and then he wants to have a tug of war over it until I finally get it away from him and throw it again. And he and I know what's going on. Now, we don't believe exactly the same propositions, but they're close enough so that we do communicate.
okay, okay. So even if they cannot say something, they still can
Hmm.
believe something. All right, that's interesting. And how about when we back to the problems that you said about Russell? Like they uh, fail because they're using the substructures, right?
He
And
initially failed. His initial conceptions of propositions failed
yeah,
because they don't explain how they can't really explain truth and falsity because they can't explain representation without getting the mind directly involved.
yes, and because I think I heard you say that they creating some structures that they call propositions, and these structures is needs and interpretations,
Yeah.
and yeah, I guess that is probably correct, but how about in your perspective? I mean, doesn't the act, like what you say, um predicating
Hmm.
hotness, for example, hotness of X, or maybe F of X,
Hmm.
is relying a prior interpretations, or maybe knowledge of what F and X are.
We have to be able to identify F and X. We know that animals can identify things. That's obvious. We can see them search for things. We can see dogs bury bones and then dig them up again. Um, and what's harder, and I don't think I understand well enough, is properties and relations. That somehow animals are certainly sensitive to properties and relations, and they can think of things as having certain properties. But I don't know what more to say about that, other than that I think they recognize there are certain ways things can be.
Okay.
And they think of some things as being those ways and other things as not being those ways. If you were to ask them, what are the ways? I mean, you could ask them, but they wouldn't know what to say. And I don't know that I know what to say. uh, except that we recognize there's a difference between X and the various ways X could be. I don't think I have a deeper explanation than that. I think I'm presupposing that.
Okay. And how about the perceiving and the thinking? I mean, I think that your perspective or theory is probably based on the how we perceiving or thinking of something as some predicates. And
Mhm.
I mean, um, another interesting ideas or questions that pops on my head is that how does your framework accounts for example, highly abstract mathematical or logic propositions where the objects basically are not perceivable?
You know, I only have thought about that a little bit and not enough, but let's start with the simplest things in mathematics. What are they? Natural numbers? One,
Yeah.
two, three, four, five, that kind of thing. Uh,
Um,
and what do you think natural numbers are? It's very hard to know what to say. There are various, you can give a set theoretical account, you can give various kinds, different set theoretical accounts, all of which make sense, but you might feel, what are they really? And I'm inclined to think that they are properties. And most of them are plural properties. What is a plural property? That's a property of some plurality.
um, if I,
And you can you
can you
can
come
you
again?
can identify natural numbers, you know, two and above with plural properties. And you can give an account of all the Frege axioms or anybody's axioms in terms of plural properties. And of course, all you need really is successor and zero
Okay.
uh, in order to get that going. Um, and I think if you get natural numbers, then you've got a good start on other things in mathematics. So I think that's where you ought to start.
Okay. So basically you're starting from the natural number and the property is being the plurality, right?
Mhm.
I've noted. What is this plurality? I mean, is this like
What is a
Frege?
property? It's just a property of more than one, a property that no single thing has, but
Yes.
maybe there's a property that others have, property that all triples have, and so on and so on and so on. And you can define successor and all that in terms of this. I think it's the simplest definition that I can think
Okay.
of, the most understandable that I can think of for starting to identify natural numbers. And then hopefully you can, of course, there are various ways of reducing other things, natural numbers. And so if you can do the natural numbers in terms of something plausible, I think this is your best shot.
Okay. So, or maybe we're predicating a set and predicating the what you call a plurality, or maybe
See, but this
numbers.
notion of a set itself is kind of hard to explain. I mean, you have to take that as
Yes.
base.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
And
And
I think if you think about children, they're going to master pluralities before they master sets.
hmm, how so? I mean, in your opinion, why?
Well, just think about, what do we do when we see little children and teach them numbers? We hold up our hand maybe and we say, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fingers. These are 5 fingers. And then you do it for, I don't know, 5. And you just count it that way and you say, see, they're all 5. Um, and similarly with the other numbers.
So there is also an act of counting, maybe, or
Well,
you
it's
will
just
maybe,
to the successor, I mean,
yeah, the successor. Okay,
yeah.
okay. Um,
You can, you can define all the primitives of arithmetic in terms of zero and successor and various plural properties that you get.
so it
Starting with
represents.
0 and then taking multiple successors. And then you can express all of this in terms of, you can define addition and subtraction and all that.
Oh,
But
so
I
in
think it's a
here you're,
natural way of starting.
yeah, we're starting with something, and we have a function so that we can
Mhm.
extend all along and go so on, like that's like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So so it separates with the world, or intertwined in your opinion? I mean,
What separates the world?
it's because like 7 must represent something, right? Like 5.
7, the numeral 7 is a name of 7, of the number 7. The number 7 is applies to a certain bunch of pluralities.
Oh, okay, it's a name.
It's a name.
I get it now. Okay, I get your point now. So there is 7 fingers like that, right? And
Yeah.
there is 5 fingers, and 5 is
Yeah.
the name that okay, it's all makes sense right now. Okay. So,
That's the
so
way we
there is
generate the
5
different names of the
fingers is the
plurality.
representations of this, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then what is the nature of this kind of representation? I mean, how this account of truth that you say as an accuracy
Mhm.
differs substantially with the classical correspondence theory, for example, because like this is, I say it an accurate because this is 5 fingers basically, it corresponds. But how about your truth as an accuracy of the cognitive acts?
Uh-huh. Um,
Sorry, I think Professor Soms lost his connection. Could you hear me, Anna?
Yeah,
oh,
I
I'm
could
just
hear you.
trying to think through this.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
Professor Song is thinking.
just trying to think through this.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm sorry. I thought the line keeps cutting. I'm sorry.
Hmm. What do I think of truth? And where does it come in? I think we start out by understanding what propositions are. And it's central to my understanding of what propositions are that they are things that represent things, other things, as being certain ways. And then just truth is very simple. Something is true, a cognitive act, which is a proposition, is true, just in case it represents as being this, that, and the other way. And they are this, that, and the other way. That's what truth is. Once we have propositions and truth, then what do we take possible worlds to be? I think they are maximal ways that things could be. Ways the universe or reality could be or could have been. But to get possible worlds, we have to already have propositions and we have to know what truth is. But I've given you propositions and I've given you truth. And from that, we can get propositions. What you could never do is start with possible worlds and get propositions and truth, in my opinion. I don't know how much of an answer that is, but.
Okay, so you think that truth is simple? I mean,
Yeah.
I still don't understand what you mean by simple. I mean, is it like a correspondence or
No, no, no. See,
no?
the problem with correspondence is you have to have things for them to correspond to.
Yes, I mean,
And that means
isn't
facts.
this a
I
state of affairs? I mean, these five figures, the state of affairs where correspondence. So when you say that the propositions or the cognitive acts is accurate, it corresponds to a state of affairs so that we can
But
judge.
these are different. The things that are corresponding are different. Or are they different?
Okay. Okay. Okay.
That's the the worry I have.
Okay. Okay. So you're worried that it will collapse into
Mhm.
like maybe Russell's
Yeah.
and it differentiates
So
between.
I don't want to have two of them, one of which is the mirror of the other.
Okay. So you want to clear that that is
Mhm.
a mirror and this is the me like that, right? Analogically. Hmm. Okay. Okay. Mm, I think what else is there? Ah, yes. And one thing that I think about when I read your books is that you are differentiating between the semantic contents and the representational and or maybe that relevant to the understanding and um
The
like
semantic
maybe
content of a sentence is just the beginning.
yeah, is it like water or kind K that you say, right?
Yeah.
And the prepositions to understand it and that I understand it correct me if I'm wrong, it's like the water is a colorless drinkable liquid and stuff and
Yeah.
that's some kind of descriptions and
Right.
and I think isn't this just mm, how is this different from Frege's idea? Frege's differentiate between the reference, the bedeutung, and sense, sin, and I think the semantic content is basically the reference, right? And the conditions of
Except sentences aren't referring objects.
Mm,
For Frege, true sentences refer to something called the true.
okay.
What do false sentences refer to? First of all, I don't know what this thing, the true, is, but false sentences. I don't think sentences are referential.
Okay. I don't think something is reflection. So, so it's just the act, like basically not, it does not refer to anything. And 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 yeah, when you said it's accurate, you are trying to differentiate between the mirrors and between the reality and what we are thinking, and the propositions is what is the act of saying things.
Mhm.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, I mean, the ideas is pretty much clear, and I'm trying to it's get it. But is this cognitive act then mind independent, or it's depend on the mind then?
Well, what do you mean? Is it mind independent? Just a physical act. My jumping up and down.
I'm sorry.
Take a physical act. My
Okay.
jumping up and down. Is that
Mhm.
independent of me? Well, not exactly. Um, at least those are instances of an act down, and I jump up and down. Then there is the different instances of the act, yours and mine. They're not identical, but what we both did was identical. The act type, the physical act type, are identical. And I just think we do the same with mental.
Okay. And maybe last questions that pop in my head, and then we can go to the Q&A sessions with the everybody. Um, what is the cognitive acts of when someone says that I always lie? I mean, like there is some paradox that spo- says that I say that I'm always lying, and what kind of types of cognitive act types that I'm doing in your perspective?
um, of me, um, namely that any, let's say, sentence that I say is not one that I believe, or perhaps is false, or however you want to do that. So there's nothing particularly special about that in terms of what kinds of things propositions are, it seems to me.
Okay, so the proposition is inaccurate or accurate, or what do you think?
Oh, the liar proposition.
Yeah, the liar propositions.
Um, the liar proposition. I would like to say it's undefined.
Undefined. So there are three truth
No, there's
values
not
there.
three. I don't think there's three truth values. I think there's
Okay.
two truth values, and then I'm not telling you anything.
Okay. So it's
It's like
undecidable,
it's
like
it's. I want to apply like the original Kripke idea. You know the Kripkean hierarchy about truth,
okay.
about being grounded and ungrounded. You can still get another contradiction out of that. I don't know. You know, I don't know what to say about that, but I know I'd like to make some version of that work.
Okay. So out of topic. So basically you rejecting the idea that probably like there is a multi-valued logic and stuff or something.
I'm not. I don't know enough about that to discuss it intelligently. I am not attracted to that.
Okay. So because you are saying that truth value is true. There's only two truth values. I just want to
Yeah.
know what's your opinion about that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Professor Soames, and yeah, we can go to the Q&A sessions
Okay.
from the audience.
Okay, thank you so much for you both guys. Thank you for Anna for that thoughtful commentary and then wonderful response also from Professor Solms. So I think we can continue to our next session, which is Q&A. So we will now open the floor for a maybe a short Q&A session. But first, I think I'm gonna the Q&A session will be open with my question. Because I think like you guys both have a really interesting discussions recently. So yeah, I think I will ask to Professor Solms about so basically my question might lean toward meta philosophy in some sense. Personally, I'm quite drawn to the philosophy of mind, while at the same time I've been trying to study the philosophy of language more deeply. What fascinates me about your talk is how propositions are not narrowly treated as linguistic entities, just as like sentences or words, but rather cognitive activities
Yes.
or act of representing and thinking.
Yes.
Yet,
Yes. Yes.
yet I often find myself puzzled about where exactly these two branches, philosophy of mind and philosophy of language, intersect. It seems to me that their overlap cannot really be separated neatly. The problem often require in some sense, interdisciplinary or even an integrative approach. So my question is, how can we draw insights from both disciplines without collapsing or reducing one into the other? Because
Both
I
disciplines
noticed
mean
that
philosophy of
there's
language, of mind. Is that what you mean by both disciplines, philosophy of language and philosophy of mind?
Yeah, because I noticed that many critics of theories, especially for introduction level or introduction textbooks, many critics of theory and philosophy of language also come from the philosophy of mind and conversely. So the discussion in philosophy of mind often get challenged from the standpoint of philosophy of language. And how should we think about this relationship without reducing either side?
I don't think I know the answer to that question.
Okay.
But what I've tried to do is we have this problem. I came to it from the philosophy of language. I didn't think any of the solutions that were proposed were good ones. And I thought of one that might be better, which I still think is better.
Mhm.
And it involves some amateur philosophy of mind on my part. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think there's got to be a connection, a close connection between philosophy of language and philosophy of mind. But up until now, there hasn't been. And philosophers of language have adopted very implausible pictures of what Frege called thoughts. Well, the very name thoughts um, kind of suggests that there's something about the mind that should be involved, but that hasn't played a very big role in philosophy of language. Um, and I think there's got to be some overlap, but I can't tell you what in the philosophy of mind to look for something that might have some relationship to what I've been talking about here, because I don't really know.
Thank you for your answer. I think that's really interesting for me since like yeah, as what you said before, you mentioned about like limit in our cognitive capabilities or propositions relation, especially for other animals. So yeah, I think uh yeah, it's an interesting answer for my question. So, okay, I think we'll now open the floor to our audience. So, yeah, let's begin with a couple question from our audience. Maybe you guys can raise your hand or indicate in the chat if your guys want to joining online. So, yeah. Maybe you guys can ask about specific example like conceptual
Just a minute,
distinction or
just a
broader.
minute. My
Sorry?
Itu,
my screen blanked out and I couldn't see or hear anything for the last minute or so.
Oh, okay. So yeah, okay. Wait. Could you hear me, Professor Soms?
Yeah, I can hear you now,
Oh,
but
okay.
you keep freezing in on the screen, and then you come
Oh,
back.
yes. Mhm.
But
Oh, but
the
been
most
been
important thing is the speaking.
mm, okay, yeah. At least you could hear me right now. So could I let our audience to ask
Sure. Yeah.
about your presentation? So yeah, maybe we could start with wait guys. Who the first one? First, with Muhammad Ilham. Could you open your mic? Mhm.
Hello,
Okay, let's
good
go.
morning,
Hello.
everybody, and exactly good evening for Professor Soms, and thank you so much for your nice explanations. And it will make me so grateful to be here in the same platform with you tonight. Yeah. So to be honest, I have a same question with Mr. Vito Aryo that I really confused when how we can uh, give a distinct about make a clear distinct about within the philosophy of mind and philosophy of language. But reading the question in the platform here, that's really there's so many interesting question here. That one of them is how can such proposition still be called true within the statement. Okay, and but I would like to move back a layer with earlier. I'm so sorry. Um, I don't know if my question here has been answered before because I got some connection issues earlier. But um, Professor Soms, in your framework, yeah, I really interested about how the you mentioned the proposition are true when supported by actual circumstance in the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
It make me wonder that how then do you handle fictional like a fictional or counterfactual proposition statement like unicorns have horns or for instance, if I say, if my grandpa were alive today, he would use AI or something like that. Are these proportions meaningless, or
No.
or
Well,
do
first of
they
all,
or rely?
propositions. Go
Yeah.
ahead. Propositions aren't
Do
meaningless
huh?
or meaningful. Uh, they are, some of them are the meanings of sentences. The sentences are meaningless or meaningful.
Mm-mm.
They're the things that have meaning. Propositions can be meanings, but they don't themselves have meanings. Uh, you might say they're meaningful.
Oh yeah.
Now, what was let's see, your question? Let's take in a story
Mm-mm.
uh, or in a fiction. Then what you want to say is that certain things are true in the fiction. That is, there are certain things that are portrayed as being true. There are certain characters in the fiction, and those characters are said to do certain things. So if you say Sherlock Holmes solved the crime, then you're saying in one of the Conan Doyle books, there is a fictional character which goes by the name of Sherlock Holmes, and the book portrays that character as having solved the crime.
So
What is
this
what
relate
is
to
a character? What is
Mhm.
a character? What is a character? Well, what is a chapter? It's a certain kind of collection of representations that we pretend to be true
Okay, okay.
in a fiction. That's what I think.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Professor.
Okay, thank you for your question, Ilham. So I think we could move to another question.
Can I have a more question following from that?
Oh,
Because I
oh,
have one interesting question. It's like, for example, someone says that 2 plus 2 equals 5. That's of course is
Yeah.
false, right? And then it says we can round a square or we can make a square triangle. Like there is an object that's called triangle square or round square, which is it doesn't exist. Then is it accurate or not? I mean, in your
You-
perspective, how we can differentiate this?
Give me one example. Was it 2 plus 2 equals 5, or is it
I
the
mean,
square is both round and square, or what is it?
yeah, how we can differentiate both of this from the perspective of the cognitive acts. I mean, is that the same or the
Oh,
same?
no, it's not the same.
It's
They're
not the
different.
same.
No. Something, let's see. It's being said that there is something which is both round and square
At the same time, yes.
at the same time, and that's just false. The
And
round square is impossible. It means it's impossible that something is round, both round and square.
I mean, is this the impossibility is from the cognitive acts itself, or is it possible to do an
No,
act
well, first of all, it's about whatever geometry is about. And just as I think that there are natural numbers, then I guess I think there are geometrical objects. Now, what do I think natural numbers are? They're certain properties, including plural properties. Most of them are plural properties. And so there are certain truths about those properties. What are geometrical objects, you might ask? I don't have any, I haven't thought about that much, so I don't know what to say about that.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Professor. Yeah. Go back to
okay.
Mr. Vito.
Okay, thank you, Arnab, for your question. So now I think we can move to another question. Sorry. Okay, maybe Mr. Shafi Rahman, could you open your mic for deliver your question?
Thanks very much for moderator and also commentator. Hello, Professor Song. How are you today, sir? Good evening,
All right.
good morning from Indonesia.
Yeah.
We'd like to ask some questions, and my question is about the. I just curious about what is the relationship between proposition and the language used to express it. And then how does context, ambiguity, and indexical word like I, here, now affect the proposition expressed? I think that's
Well,
my question because I just
go ahead.
curious about that.
Okay,
Thank you so much, sir.
I think indexicals are directly referential and they have different reference in different views. So when you learn the meaning of the indexical I, first person singular pronoun, then you learn that its content, what it contributes to the proposition expressed by anyone who uses it, is the person who uses it. And there are similar rules for, well, take say, the third person masculine singular pronoun he. The only rule we have that is that it's going to be a contextually salient male. And which contextually salient male it is has to be something which is identifiable to the audience to whom relevant sentence is uttered. And in the case of now, it has to be a time that includes the present. But what amount of time that includes the present? Just the moment? Just the day? Just the year? It varies. And it's all that has to do with the presuppositions of speakers and hearers as they may vary from one context to the other. So that's the case of indexical expressions. Now, what were the other expressions you were concerned with besides indexicals? I don't remember what else. You asked about something in addition to indexicals, I think.
Yeah, but I'm very curious about the relation, that's all, Prof, between a proposition and the language used to express it. That's all. But
Okay.
I just get it about the indexical word. That's all, Prof.
Okay, well, the
Hello,
indexicals
Prof.
I've explained, but it doesn't have to be just indexicals. There can be words like Hesperus and phosphorus. And I think there are presuppositions that attach to some names, not all names, not my name, maybe not your name, but they attach to those names, a few of those names. And those get to be part of propositions expressed by uses of them when it's well enough known what you're supposed to be presupposing when you use them. I remember when I was starting philosophy and reading Frege and all that, and thinking about Hesperus and phosphorus, thinking, what is Hesperus? Is that the morning? Is that the evening? What is phosphorus? Which one is which? And at that time, I didn't understand the two names, even though they named the same thing. And so I think that kind of thing happens. And even things like water, for example. It's simply the name of a kind. That's its extension. That's what it contributes to its representational content. But you're supposed to know more about water. If all you know about water is, well, I don't know, it refers to something that people talk about a lot, but you have no idea what it is, well, then you're not counted as a competent user of the word. So what we have is, in my terminology, is a combination of semantic content plus presuppositions associated with some of the relevant words, some of the relevant kind words, and many of the relevant name words, and so on. Semantics is a combination of things. That is understanding what proposition is asserted and so on. That's a combination of things, not a single thing.
Thank you, Professor. I am understand right now because
Okay.
because I'm just very confusing about the proposition because I never use that in English language because sometimes I'm very confusing to use that. So maybe this is my first time to learn about analytic philosophy. So I just get small clue about that, but that's okay.
Oh, look,
Professor.
what your understanding is right. The word proposition, as I use it, as it's been used for basically 100 years or more in analytic philosophy, is a specialized use. It's a theoretical use. It's a use that is used in semantics and the philosophy of language. These are not yet fully scientific disciplines. We are trying to establish firmer foundations for these disciplines so that they can become more scientific.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Maybe next time we can chat later about that. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mr. Moderator, and also for commentator.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for your questions. And due to our time, our limited time, I think we can only open for the last question. So I will let our audience to raise their hand if you guys have any questions, maybe for the last time before I close our discussion. So yeah.
I think if it's not, I can ask one more questions if there's no.
Wait. I think one of our audience want to ask about
This
something.
Sabik
I think
Novel.
yeah, Sabik Novel want to ask something. Could you hear me, Sabik Novel? Could you open your mic for deliver your questions?
Hello, Professor Scott.
Mhm.
Sorry, Prof. I would like to continue with the question I asked Liner. Jadi apa? My name is Saping Noval. I have this message fan you well. And I'm currently studying Islamic philosophy and mysticism. I have been exploring to the topic proportion and truth supporting circumstances in Sufism, and I would like to ask for your insight on Ivy's critical questions related to it. In Sufi talk, truth al-haq is often regarded as inner and experiential rather than purely logical or empirical. This leads me to wonder how such spiritual truths can be analysis or justified within the framework of logical proposition and truth condition. Nah, specific specifically, I'm curious about the following. Can mystical proposition, so as I saw the divine like, be evaluated using the same truth supporting circumstances as rational or empirical propositions. How we understand the relation between propositional truth and ontological truth in the context of Ibn Arabic concept of wahdat al-wujud and unity of being. I would be deeply grateful if you could share your thoughts of recommend readings that could help me better understand this intersection between logis and Sufi epistemology. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. I truly appreciate your guidance. Thank you, Prof.
So
I
yeah,
would,
maybe I could. Go ahead.
I would hope somebody
Please.
could clarify. I got bits and pieces of that, but I don't think I fully understood.
Yep. Okay. So maybe I can help you to to clarify his question. Let me rephrase. I think like to put it more simple, I think based on his text on the chat box, I think what he want to know is basically about the proposition of truth in non-Western philosophy, especially like he talking about Western philosophy demands a correspondence between statement and reality.
Yes.
But in another side, he brings like a Sufi statement like "I am the truth" or something like that, that transcends the subject and object duality. And then what he want to ask basically about can such proposition or how we should treat this kind of proposition like beyond our traditional or our mainstream epistemological understanding. Could you
It's
could
a
you could you
it's a poetic statement that requires interpretation and cannot be taken literally. Any person who says, I am the truth, is saying that he is the property of being true. And no such person is a property at all, let alone being the property of being true. So you have to understand what the person is trying to get across, which is metaphorical. And you have to have the background in the relevant metaphorical literature in order to assign interpretation to it. And probably in many cases, there will be more than one possible interpretation. And no single one perhaps can be thought to get everything that the person was trying to convey. But this is a very different enterprise from the kind that I've been conducting.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
okay.
you can get that answer clearly. So thank you so much for your explanation.
If I may just
Yes.
come in and put a last
Thank you.
question, a very short question to Professor Swamij, if it is
Okay,
possible.
okay, go ahead,
Yes.
Professor Wiswas.
Thank you, Prof. Scott Swames.
Okay, Professor Swamij, if you can hear me. Can you hear me, Professor Swamij?
Very well. I can hear you very well.
Okay. Okay, so I just have a question about how to understand the reference of a qualia, mental qualia. Let's say a thought about a certain color, a dream about a certain context, or a kind of an experience that is just qualitative without a prepositional attitude. How do we translate it to a preposition, and how we fix its connotative reference if we can connote a qualia in a certain way in the world? This
You're
arises
talking
from,
about- Go ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, please, please,
You're talking
please, sir.
about things qualia.
Yes, yes,
And you can
yes.
think of some of them, as we might put it, are color qualia, and other things are other kinds of qualia. But when we talk about them, we're not saying that anything in the world has that color, let's say. Is that right?
Yes, yes. Yes.
Let me, just to be specific so that I can focus on this, I'm going to try to relate it to something, an experience I had when I was a young boy and I was undergoing a serious operation. And at that time, they didn't use the same kinds of medication to put you to sleep, as they said, as they do now. And they used something that was called ether. It was a kind of gas, and they put a mask over your face. And they asked me to count backwards from 100 as far as I could. And so I started. My eyes were closed, and I was speaking, but I had a kind of vision as if again, there was a blue background and there was a bright yellowish ball in the middle of it. And it gradually went around in a spiral motion in circles and circles as I continued to count. And I can see, so to experience even now. Was I seeing anything blue or bright yellow and all of that? My opinion, no. But I was experiencing a mental experience, which was qualitatively similar in many ways, experience that I could have if I were facing a blue background and watching a little go, except that even in the wake of the fire, the fire continued. But anyway, remember, now you might ask, did I see something blue? Did I see something yellow? I personally would say no. I didn't see any such thing, but I did have an experience which was very similar to one that I could have had if I were not under any medication and somebody was doing something in front of me. Here's another thing. If I take my finger and bring it very close to my face, then I seem to see two images at a certain point, even though there's only one finger there. Do I actually see those images? I don't think so. I think I only see the finger, which appears to look as if there were two fingers there, a little bit at least. So perhaps those are qualia, but I don't think we see them when I see normally. I think they're in some way, I don't think we see them at all. I think we're having an experience which is very similar to seeing, but I don't think I was seeing anything. Now, I don't know if that goes any distance to answering your question or not. Maybe you can tell me.
Yeah. I mean, I take your explanation with all seriousness, and probably I was interested in connoting the qualia in language, whether that can be done as a further question in a very brief way.
You went blank and I couldn't hear you. Try
I'm saying, I'm saying, can this qualia, I mean, in some cases, can this qualia be represented in a proposition, in a connotative manner or in a denotative manner?
I don't see. I think I just talked about them. I just made.
Sure, fine.
I
Thank
just
you.
expressed propositions about them. Of
Okay.
course.
Okay. Sure. All right. Thank you, Professor Swamis. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for your question, Professor Wiswa. So I think that's our last question for our
Okay.
session today. So yeah, as we come to the end of this discussion, maybe I would like to take a moment to reflect on what we have, or at least I have, witnessed and learned together. So over the past hour, Professor Swarms has got us through one of the most, I think, intricate and also foundational issues in philosophy, especially in uh, analytic tradition, which is what is a proposition. Not as an abstract or lifeless entity, but as something deeply connected to our cognitive life. His talk shows us that meaning and truth are not detached, uh, metaphysical abstraction, but living structure of thought or act thought, which the mind represents reality. Uh, what makes today especially significant is not only the depth of the topic, but its rarity, especially in Indonesia. Discussion of proposition, semantic, or cognitive representation are seldom explored with such rigor and philosophical precision. So that's why we really appreciate how Professor Soms explained about his idea. Much of our academic discourse and philosophy often gravitates toward ethical, social, or continental tradition. To have Professor Solms here sharing a cornerstone's idea of the analytic tradition is such an accessible yet intellectually demanding way. It's both an honor and much needed bridge for our philosophical landscape, I think. So yeah, I think Professor Solms has reminded us that propositions, sorry, should not should not be understood as a set of possible word or as a mere logical abstractions. They are rather repeatable cognitive act types, mental events that express how we perceive, judge, and believe the world to be. In reframing proposition in this way, he gives us a framework that connects language, mind, and truth in a continuous movement, I think. So yeah, for example, in his analysis from Hesperus and phosphorus to water and H2O reveals that language operates not only on a semantic level, but also in a cognitive and contextual level, shaped by presuppositions, understanding, and also community. This insight has implication far beyond philosophy of language. It touches epistemology, cognitive science, and even how we think about communication in, for example, in an age mediated by technology. So yeah, personally, as someone who studies philosophy of language and philosophy of technology, I found Professor Som's frameworks transformative. It reminds us that even in the of meaning still lies on and still lies in acts of cognition, in the very human capacity to represent and understand. So yeah, and then I would like to once again, like for those of us in Indonesia, this discussion is more than an academic exercise. It is a step toward building a more dialogical and globally connected philosophical community. So I would like to say thank you for intuitionistic idea, and then also Uberman's project for organize this session. So yeah, uh, on behalf of everyone here, I would like to express our deepest gratitude to Professor Scott Soames for his clarity and for the generosity of his insight. And for showing us how analytic philosophy remains alive and evolving. His work continues to remind us that language, mind, and meaning also are not separate subjects. They are different dimensions of the same philosophical question about how thought makes context with reality. And also, I would like to say my thanks also go to Arnab for his thoughtful commentary, and then all the participants for your engagement and curiosity throughout this session. So thank you so much for you guys. So let us close with a one key takeaway, at least for myself. Propositions are not about words alone, like just only words. They are about living activity of understanding itself. And for me, in that sense, to study philosophy of language is also to study the very structure of thought and the most human thing we have. So maybe that's all for me. So I would like to say
Well, thank you.
for
And feel free to keep in
Yeah.
touch. If any of you want to ask questions or pursue something further, just give me an email.
Okay, thank you
Sure.
so
Thank
much,
you so much. We really
Professor
appreciate
Scott
that. So
Soames.
yeah. Thank you for everyone. Maybe we could finish our discussion here. So yeah, once again, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure.